Hello, Central Region. How we doing? That's a funny question because you guys can't come off mute. We kept it that way for a reason, just to keep the chaos to a minimum. We'll have enough chaos with the presentation. So I'm kidding. But yes, you guys are on mute. We're doing a lot through the chat. I'll let George introduce all that. But thank you so much for joining. We appreciate it. You have so many people. This is awesome. This is great.
We'll give another minute or so for everybody to get settled here. All right, Ginny, I'm going to disable the waiting room for now just so people can hop in automatically, and I think we can get started here. All right. Perfect. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Those of you that joined after Nathan made the little announcement, you'll notice that the microphones are muted. We're going to stay that way just because of the size of the call. Looks like there's already 63 people here, so thank you all for taking the time to be here. Right now, the chat is also disabled. We found out after the first round here that it was getting a little distracting. So what we're going to do is open up the chat when it's time to ask some questions. I'll talk about some things and then we'll open up the chat, try to get to as many of your questions as we can, and we'll keep going from there. Um, yeah, sounds good. So first of all, welcome. And again, thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here and being so interested in what happens with USPSA here. Um, Quick update on time. I was hoping to keep these at about 60 minutes, but apparently I talk way too much. They've been running closer to 90 to almost 2 hours, 90 minutes, almost 2 hours. So if this is getting too long, I understand you have family commitments and that sort of thing. That's totally fine. We are going to be posting those recordings on the website as soon as possible, hopefully as soon as tomorrow. So you can always check that out. If you have any additional questions or anything, like I said, we're going to toggle on that chat feature throughout the presentation so you can jump in, ask your questions, and we'll try our best to answer them for you. But also there will be more opportunities to share your feedback through like a Google form that will also be kind of coming out soon, maybe tomorrow. All right, so we are going to start with some introductions, do a little grounding, talk about all the awesome growth the USPSA has had recently, and then dive into the proposed structure. So we'll talk about leagues, regional classics, nationals, opens, all those things that you probably already saw in the little teaser infographic there. And then talk about next steps and what this plan is going to be, and then have some more time at the way in to answer some questions. Like I said, we're going to stop throughout some of these bigger chunks so that we can really make sure everybody's on the same page for what this looks like. Real quick on the call with us today, we do have Nathan Mayer, our president. We've got Brett Passmore, the vice president here. Audrey Sutterfield, who's our central regional director. Lexi is our treasurer. Ginny is our secretary. And then you will be stuck with me. I'm George Ostrom. I'm the director of sport for USPSA. I will be doing the most of the talking and everything. You're going to be very sick of my voice in the next hour, but congratulations. To start with here, we're going to do a little bit of a grounding activity. We did this with both the other groups, and maybe unsurprisingly, the results were very similar. So what I want you to do is just think real quick. Don't worry about the QR code right now if you're on a mobile or whatever. We'll drop the link in the chat here. Yeah, if anybody's on that doc can do that for me right now, that'd be awesome. But while that's happening, I want you to think about what soccer means to you. Just like one word, maybe two words. If you have multiple, you can submit more than one, just do them one at a time. and we will start to build a little word cloud about what this sport means to our community. Thank you, Jenny. Go ahead and pop on that link. I will share it out so we can see what's happening in real time. We've got competition. That's the biggest one so far. Teamwork, family, passion, inclusive. See where this goes. All right, thank you all for participating. This is awesome. Keep it up. I'm just going to talk over it so we can keep moving along here. But what I noticed right now, ooh, Freedom's getting bigger here too. What I've noticed though is that every single time we've done this for each of our regional town halls, the two biggest options here were competition and community, and that happened again tonight. So I think all of us really feel that that is at the heart of what we do, right? That's the heart of our organization. It's yes, it's competition, but it's also that community. I love the friendship, sportsmanship. Whoever wrote 6-7, way to go. I'm guessing you're one of our younger athletes here, right? Good work. Love it. Cool. So I'm going to switch back to the here. Go ahead if you're still typing. Go ahead, keep doing that. That's totally fine. We're going to jump back at the way end, but for now, let's carry on. I just really wanted to set that framework and that mindset of this is why this is the intentionality behind everything that we're proposing here. We want that community and we want that competition. So growth. USPSA has some pretty awesome problems to get to celebrate tonight, right? So we have more teams, more athletes. Every year at the Conference Cup, there are more and more matches. We just keep busting through the ceiling, right? You'll see here starting in the 21-22 season, we had 54 teams and 373 athletes. Every year since, we've been getting more and more teams and more athletes. So our numbers are just going up and up. Just looking at the teams that attend the Conference Cup, 21-22, we had 36, stayed the same. 23-24 went up to 39, 44, and this year we're anticipating 48 teams to be at the Conference Cup. Um, Last time I checked, Turnstone hasn't been keeping up with our growth either, unfortunately. It's a fantastic facility, but they still haven't found a way to grow that fifth court. Um, they're still working on it. But yeah, we're getting to the point now where we're already packed like sardines, and it's the best. I mean, it's the highlight of our season to be at nationals and to have all of their teams there and to be able to connect with or with each other to be able to compete all those things. But it's getting to the point now that the good thing is that we're growing, right? The bad thing is that it's getting to the point now that we can't sustain that in one building. We've looked at other venues and things, and we can talk about all of the roadblocks that we've come there. But um, yes, and the other thing is the 140 matches. That's so many matches to fit into 4 days. Right? It's a really incredible starting at 7 in the morning, ending at 7 at night for 4 days in a row. Some of the other logistical challenges here. We need more than, 4+ courts for someone to host. We need enough space for team areas. We need the charging capacity. Turnstone was intentional when they built their building to be able to help with this. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we've had to get in some extra power supplies too in the last year or something. But there was some sort of contingency plan, I believe. Anyway, that's been a huge issue with circuits popping and everything, and then chairs not being charged and not able to compete. Just having enough space for lunches. The Turnstone is wonderful about having those accessible family restrooms and everything, but not every venue that's that size or larger has those facilities available. So also scheduling, having enough court times, like I said, the earlier starts, the later finishes, waiting, the amount of time we're waiting between matches. Last year there were some teams that had matches on Thursday and Friday and then nothing on Saturday and then their final on Sunday. And there was so much time in between there and how, just that's the nature of having so many teams. And one of the biggest ones right now too is this referee shortages. So referees, this is a much bigger conversation for another day. It's a serious problem for our organization, and we need to do something about it. We can have a framework that helps build towards that. We're not there. This plan in and of itself isn't going to totally fix all of these problems by any means, and there's more work to be done. However, I want you to just kind of take a peek at what we're experiencing right now. So this season, when I pulled this about almost exactly a month ago, we had 56 registered referees. A couple, I think, have registered since then. Of those 56, only 32 of them have actually been a center official for a match this season. And then a startling thing here too, we've had 182 matches as of this point that have the score sheets that have been submitted. There have been 182 matches submitted as of 3/14. 76% of our matches were reffed by 17 referees. So across the country, all of our matches, 76% were by 17 referees. And it gets even more stark than that. 49%, so pretty much half of our matches for the entire season were reffed by 9 individuals. So 9 individuals were reffing half of the matches across the entire country. So this is a huge problem. We need to do a lot of work to fix this in order to be able to facilitate larger events like a bigger conference and cup. But yes, like I said, this is a problem for another day, but I do want you to have this in the back of your mind. So now what? We do need to evolve. And there are many, many ways that we could restructure. There's so many different options, and we considered more than I thought originally would even be possible. There's so many benefits to a lot of those plans, and there's also so many drawbacks, right? Um, some of the unfortunate truths here, we'll see if this lands. My magic wand is broken. All right, I got Brett because he knew it was coming. That was it. Sorry, Zach. If Zach's on the call, he said I should try one more time to see if that joke landed, but it hasn't landed any of the 3 nights. So I guess for our fourth town hall that won't exist, I won't say that one. Anyway, no, but in all seriousness, one of the unfortunate truths is that there's going to be no solution that's perfect, and no solution will be loved by everybody. I think another important thing is that no single person is going to love the entirety of any plan that we come up with, right? We all want to be together. We all want to do all the things that we've grown to a point where it's just not feasible right now. So my goal for everybody today is to understand the what and the why of what we're proposing, to have that time to ask questions and give feedback. Before these town halls, I shared some of this information with someone who wishes to remain anonymous, and their response after hearing everything, they were pretty worried about it. After hearing everything, their response was, I hate this plan significantly less than I thought I would. And I hope that more of you can also have a similar feeling. Maybe you're super skeptical about it, um, but I think it's pretty clear that something has to change. Maybe we're not going to love the different options here. But that's kind of a quote that resonated with me, at least. I could definitely relate. Right now, we have our conference structure. We've got the recreational, non-conference, and then the conferences, of course, founders, presidents, champions, premier. What we're proposing is to move to more of a league structure. This is just kind of the big overview. We're gonna break all these down in a minute here. Recreational won't change very much. After recreational will be the Ascent League. The Ascent League will follow the USPSA laws of the game, and it's really focusing on equity. The Apex League is for those elite players, those elite teams, and it will start to adopt the FIFA laws of the game. We went from having a nationals only, right? That's what we have. It's unified nationally. It's a single event. Anybody that makes their minimum game count is eligible to participate. Sorry, any conference teams that make their minimum game count are allowed to participate. And the emphasis is just on competition, right? We show up and we play the games. We happen to see each other and talk on the sidelines. Um, what we're proposing though is to switch to more of a regional classic as our primary, pinnacle of the season. So it won't be nationally unified. It'll be unified within the region. That means there's going to be 3 separate events. It's going to be open to everyone in the region. Um, and the emphasis on this is going to be not only competition, but also on development. We'll talk about what that might look like, but we tried to be as intentional as we could about not only having competition, but also that community aspect and also just growing the sport. Nationals will still exist, but it'll be a smaller secondary competition. It's not that highlight that everyone goes to. It would be earned. It would be a little more meaningful to get that opportunity to attend. And it would also be a lot smaller, right? It's not open to everyone. It would only be open to those that would qualify. So for leagues, here's just another quick overview as a visual. Recreational would be non-competitive. Ascent and Apex would be those competitive leagues. So if teams want to play sanctioned matches and that sort of thing, they would be in one of those two leagues. Recreational Ascent can follow the USPSA laws of the game, while Apex is going to start adopting the FIFA laws of the game. No classifications for Ascent or Recreational, but Apex is also going to start adopting those classifications that we use internationally. And then the last thing, Ascent and Apex are going to be eligible for clubs. We'll talk all about it. But this is just kind of a quick visual to categorize, right? See where you and your team might want to land here. Okay, we talked about recreational. Those are the non-competitive teams. We're really focusing on just an introduction to the sport, development, the joy of soccer. You can picture these teams right now they likely don't have any Strike Force chairs or one or two, right? They're using their everyday chairs with that plastic wraparound guard or whatever it is to kick the ball around, and just having fun experiencing the sport, not looking to travel and play matches. For these recreational teams, there will not be a roster limit. They'll follow the USPSA laws of the game, so no classifications. Um, and at the regional classics, they would definitely be allowed to attend and to participate in all of the development opportunities, but not in the competitive side unless they re-register as a competitive team. Okay, now it gets a little more complicated. We have to really do a mindset shift here when we're talking about Ascent. So Ascent, the focus is on competitive equity. It's still a competitive league, but it's more about balancing competition rather than playing at that elite level. So we're looking for growth, equitable competition, building or perhaps rebuilding your team. And there are also roster limits. So up to 12 teams would be able to, or sorry, up to 12 athletes would be able to register for an Ascent team for the season. But when they come to play, their actual like game day roster will be down to 8. So that means there might be 4 that can't travel, or maybe one game, if you have a full 12, you could, 4 of them might not be on the first game and then they can join in the second, or however that would work out. But we're trying to keep it at 8 to keep the sidelines a little less busy. When you have 8 chairs sitting on the sidelines that aren't playing, it starts to interfere with the court and everything. So we wanted to make sure that there was space that way. Um, yeah, they're going to follow the USPSA laws of the game. And essentially, Ascent is the continuation of our current practices. This is kind of what we do for our conferences right now, right? We show up, we follow the USPSA laws of the game. We have a roster that we pull from, and we go from there. Now, the difference is going to be with this Apex League. This is going to be the most competitive league. And it's really designed for those teams at kind of that premier level or that maybe champions, upper champions level that really want to push themselves to, again, innovation, challenge, mentorship. They're really looking to take their level of soccer up a notch. Roster limits for Apex will be 8 for the season and also 8 for the competitive roster. These are the same, and it might seem redundant, but when we start talking about our clubs and our roster fluidity, this will make a little bit more sense. And the other big shift is that we're going to be using the FIFA laws of the game for this Apex league, but we are going to modify the classifications slightly just for inclusivity. We don't want to exclude anyone that might not necessarily fit under that classification. We are going to dive into that in just a moment, but right now I'm going to unlock the chat. But before you start typing your frantic questions, I want you to take a look at this green section here. So far, we've really talked about the league overview, just basic details about the recreational, ascent, and apex teams. If you have any questions specific to that, now is your chance. If anything that you have questions on are like classifications or roster fluidity, that sort of thing, hold off for now. We're going to get there and then we'll get you another chance to ask your question. But go ahead. If you have questions, you are now able to type it in the chat. Again, focusing on maybe what these leagues look like, any questions around that as they come in, I'm going to try my best to answer them. Either everybody's typing really long messages or, oh, there we go. You say you're following FIFA laws of the game for Apex, but do we have referees that are classified to ref those games? Awesome question. So, we do have some FIFA certified referees, and I would like to get more FIFA certified referees. Right now, we are going to have our referees start enforcing the FIFA laws of the game. Um, However, it's going to be more of a supplemental training, and then they won't be official FIFA referees, if that makes sense. Once we get that approval and they start working international matches, hopefully we can start building an infrastructure of more FIFA certified referees that because then we can start growing our whole base of referees as well. So um, it's a great question. We don't have any, or we don't have enough FIFA referees to do that. We are going to apply the laws of the game with our USPSA referees. All of the proposed changes have to be voted on, correct? Yes, absolutely. We'll talk about that when we get down to next steps. How will the two rules be managed by the organization? Wayne, that's a great question. So the right now there are definitely some differences between the FIFA laws of the game and the USPSA laws of the game, but they are strikingly similar. I would say like 95% of everything is the exact same. When we get frustrated watching an international match, it's not necessarily that the laws of the game are different for those sorts of things, but it's more about the interpretation of those countries, right? So if in Europe they call 2-on-ones completely different, even though the wording is almost the exact same. So a lot of it's interpretation, and I think we have that problem domestically already, so it might add to that. But essentially, I think the differences between the two are subtle enough that I think it'll be okay. Um, if there are no longer promotions and demotions for the lower level teams, what is there to push for incremental improvements? I fear some teams will stagnate. Good question, Brandon. So yes, right now there aren't promotions or demotions. I think everyone has that intrinsic desire to want to perform at the highest level that they can, right? And we want to try to push as many teams into that apex that feel comfortable. We'd actually talked about having a third league that would be kind of, an in-between sort of thing. Right now we don't, if we're already breaking regionally, we didn't feel like we had quite enough teams to make that work yet. It's a possibility for the future. Um, and kind of like what Brett was saying, right now our promotions and our relegations are kind of broken. So just for instance, this year, if we were to follow that regular schedule, we were supposed to have 10 at Premier and 10 at Champions, right? Founders would have ended up having the rest, what was that, 18? Did I do my math right? 18 different teams in one league, which isn't feasible, right? So we decided to split them to 12, 12, 12. And that meant we had to take some of the teams that were supposed to be relegated and then keep them in the cup they were at before. So there were so many things that were changing and those manual shifts that we were doing, regardless of what was supposed to happen anyway. That I mean, in an ideal world, it was a great system, but it just in practicality, it ended up not working the way that, or maybe it started working the way that we wanted it to. But recently, there have been so many adjustments that it hasn't really been working the way we wanted it. If a new team were to be started, would they have to wait 2 years in order to play nationals or regional, or is it, yeah. So yeah, right now with our system, they do have to wait, right? They have to start, or maybe they're starting as a recreational team, and the next year they're a non-conference team, and then now finally they're eligible for the cup. This isn't the case anymore. No, if we went to this plan, they would be allowed to participate in that regional event the very first year of their formation. When did we start to not follow if it allows the game with exception of classification? Dominic, we just don't update our laws of the game as often as FIFA does. So when FIFA will make a change and then we kind of sit on it and decide what to do, but there's just a couple year gap in between there where things are evolving and we don't catch up for a while. So we do usually end up adopting everything. It's just a matter of time. This is kind of eliminating that wait period. If the goal is to migrate all of the USPSA teams to follow FIFA long term, no, nope. FIFA is kind of exclusionary. So like there, I don't particularly love some of the things that FIFA is doing as far as allowing athletes to participate or not participate. Um, and we do need to maintain a set of laws of the game that make sense for domestic play because I don't want everyone to have a classification. I want people to be able to enjoy soccer because they enjoy soccer and whether or not they meet the classifications or whatever. So no, not for everyone. I've heard you say you don't just want to split nationals into two events because you don't want to split up skill levels. Can you give us some other high-level reasons for not just keeping the current structure and having two separate nationals? Yeah, like Ginny said, this that would be a band-aid. We could make it work. We could make a longer one we could make a 6-day event, right? And that would work. But then once we get 60 teams, once we get 70 teams, then what do we do, right? We're going to have to keep patching the systems every time that we make those changes. It's not something that is a sustainable growth model. The other thing, making sure I'm getting are you saying can we just keep it as two events or just to break it up in general. I think one of the biggest things right now too is just the referee infrastructure and just the human infrastructure. We don't have the volunteers, we don't have the referees in order to take that much time off of work to say, yes, I'm going to devote a full week off of work to help you at this specific event, or maybe you have back-to-back weekends with split cups. And now everybody's going to this one, and then someone gets sick and can't make it to the next one, and then they're short-staffed, and there's going to be so many more logistics because we don't have enough hands. Okay, I'm gonna toggle off the chat for a second and answer as much as I can here before we move on. I want to be respectful of your time. What is the reason that Apex League needs to follow FIFA classifications? So, Kevin, the FIFA laws of the game for Apex is meant to be the most elite, the most elite level of play, and there's a difference between at all skill levels. Like if last night I was talking about Little League baseball, where everyone bats around, right? If you're sitting on the bench and you're not playing in the outfield or whatever, you're still going to take your turn at bat, whether you have 9 athletes or you have 12. And but by the time you get older, then there are some athletes that sit on the bench all the time, right? So like it's a different there's a different dynamic. And in soccer, if when you're in the younger leagues you can do substitutions as often as you want, right? There's kids coming off and on the field at all times, but the real way is once you come off the pitch, you're done, right? So that's just that next level of gamesmanship and of strategy and all those things. So it's another element to the game to kind of keeps things the way that so yeah, that there's that aspect of it, but it's also the just the fairness, the and having a team that has all PF2s might have an inherent advantage over a team that has PF1s. So it gives more athletes an opportunity to play. Maybe there's a couple PF1s on a team, and only one of those PF1s is getting a lot of playing time because they have three PF2s on the court all the time. Now that other athlete can also have some of that playing time, um, because with the classifications, they're going to need to do that. Chris, I'm going to talk about classifications next. If long term we will not follow FITFO, why are we implementing it for Apex at all? It's going to be my vision is to continue to have a league that follows the fit philosophy of the game. I want to make ourselves a little more to be able to stand on the international podium a little bit as well. Right now, like we just had the Club World Cup and nobody, I mean, it was at the exact same time that our nationals was last year, but we didn't have representation there because we don't have any classified clubs. We don't have any teams that can compete at that level. And I think the more that we have, it doesn't have to be everyone by any means, but I think the more that we can, the bigger, the more teams we can build at that level, it's going to bring some more eyeballs to the sport. It's going to bring that kind of seriousness up a little bit. Can teams switch from Apex to Ascent from season to season? Yes, Xander, they can. In Ascent, I worry new teams competing against solid teams playing for years could cause new teams or athletes to feel very defeated and turn them away from the sport as something. Yes. Yep, Enoch, we'll talk about that next. Okay, perfect. Let's talk about classifications. That question came up at the end here. Why classifications? It's like I was saying, I should have waited until we got here, but it's to balance that elite competition, make sure that it's as fair as possible. It's to prepare teams and athletes for the international competition. And another factor is that with the IOC or the IPC, the International Olympic or Paralympic Committees, classification will add a lot more validity and will help them or help us along the ways of being recognized by those committees. Now, someone in the that I've seen in the chat already has had some emails with me recently, and I really appreciated talking about how we don't want to be chasing this. This shouldn't be our primary goal, and I 100% agree. We're pushing this for we're pushing the classifications for the sport domestically. That's what we really want. If this happens along the way, I think it's awesome. If we can get more eyeballs on the sport. But I want to make sure that we're intentional about not chasing, just Olympic aspirations and for throwing everything else to the side. Um, how? Okay. It's pretty easy if an athlete already has a FIFA classification. If they're already a PF1 or PF2, then congratulations, that's what they're going to play at domestically, right? They're just going to retain that classification. I need to remind you again, there was some confusion about this, I think, on the first town hall. This is only for Apex. Okay, this is not for Ascent. It's only for Apex teams. Ascent does not need to go through this process um, unless they're going to be playing up, which we'll talk about. But this is only for Apex, only for those elite teams that are choosing to participate in that level of play. Athletes without those sporting classes will have to work towards one. The start of it is going to be very provisional and it's going to be kind of a self-assignment. So based on the FIFA classification rule book, teams will essentially register their athletes as a PF1 or a PF2 to their best, knowledge where they think they're going to land on that scale. It's not going to be perfect. I hope that our athletes and our teams are going to be honest enough in their assessments of their abilities. If we're running into problems, then of course we'll have to go through some grievance processes and whatnot to balance things out. But initially, this is going to be a way to jump right in. We had thought about maybe making this a slow rollout, right? Let's start year one and not have it, and then year two, maybe we'll start to adopt it. But what we thought the best thing to do was to just rip off the Band-Aid. Everything's changing. We're just going to go with it and go from there. Athlete classifications will be posted on the website, so it's apparent to everyone. If you're playing this team, you'll know who the PF1s are, you'll know who the PF2s are. They must be officially classified within 2 years of their provisional classification. So if they just say, "Yep, I'm a PF2," that's fine, and they can play that way, unless it's egregiously not the case. There are more so for a PF1, I guess, but for those of you who are unaware, PF1 would be the ones that would have less mobility. This question came up, and I should have added it to the slides. But so PF1 would be someone who has a more severe disability. If you want to go that route, it does the classification rule book does break it down by the type of disability. So if you have a limb loss or something, depending on there's a few different factors for what would make that a PF1 versus a PF2. Oftentimes, athletes who are PF2s can turn their head. If their hand falls off their joystick, they can get it back onto their joystick. Where a PF1, maybe if their hand falls off, they can't return it, or they're not able to turn their whole head, or their positioning has to be just perfect. And if they're off slightly, then it throws off their whole game, or maybe they're very spastic, that sort of thing. So it's a way to kind of balance out the level of play on the court. But yes, so going back to this though, within 2 years, they're going to have an official FIFA classification. Now, these are going to be available at all of the regional events, so it is something that we can work towards. Nathan is saying it's an easy process. We'll talk about it. Um, Now, we do have some inclusivity concerns. So FIFA is really strict about eligibility. Pretty much they say if you're not a PF1 or a PF2, then power soccer isn't your sport and you are not allowed to participate. So we have some athletes who are playing domestically right now that would not be a PF1 or a PF2. They would be higher than that or not have as severe of a disability, if you will. Um, but for those individuals, they've been playing for years, and we want to continue to encourage participation of anybody that feels that power soccer is their sport, right? If you feel that this is a sport for you and you are playing it, then you should be entitled to play it. Um, so if you don't meet the PF1 or PF2 sporting classes, you'd be given you'd play as a PF2 for domestic club play, but you'd be as like a PF2 plus, just so it would just kind of say, yes, you didn't quite meet the PF2 for whatever reason, but you can play as a PF2 domestically. You wouldn't be eligible for international play because you aren't internationally allowed to, essentially. But domestically, for any event that's happening within USPSA, you would be allowed to participate with your Apex team. Um, Another concern that has been brought up frequently is like, what if we don't have enough PF1s? So the group of us did kind of go through all of the teams that we thought might end up landing in Apex, and there was only a handful of them that maybe have this problem, but almost none. What we do say though is that it's always an option to stay in Ascent. So if you feel like you can't meet this PF1, you can't have two PF1s on the court at all times, it's okay to stay at Ascent. That's an option for everybody. And it's also an opportunity to start recruiting new players, whether it's new to your team or it's new to the sport. And that kind of leads us into clubs and roster fluidity. So some of the advantages of this, and I should have switched the slide order around. I'm going to jump to this part first. Clubs are essentially one Ascent team and one Apex team that would join together in a partnership. The organizations, so yeah, it could be organizations with multiple teams that have this club. So I'm thinking of like Minnesota United right now. If they have an academy team, or like Sting. Sting also has their Sting team, and they have the Sting Academy team. This is kind of what this was designed for. You have these two teams. They can play, they have maybe a shared practice space, or they have similar staff members. They see each other frequently. They can work with each other. And then they would have this partnership where we would have some roster fluidity and opportunities for playing at a more advanced level. To kind of broaden this a little bit though, and not because there are some teams that don't have, academy team. I would say the majority of teams don't. So as long as the teams are in the same state or within 150 miles of each other, they would be allowed to be a part of be a part of a club. The advantages, it would give athletes opportunities to experience competitive play, so some of those Ascent level players would be allowed to participate on the Apex roster. And it would also allow teams with limited rosters to commit to traveling. So right now, if your team only has four athletes, it's hard to say, yes, I can certainly come to this tournament across the country in, 2 months, right? Because you don't know if someone's going to get sick, or if someone's going to be in the hospital, or they lose a grandparent and have to go to the funeral. Like, who knows? There's so many things that happen. Um, you can't always commit to traveling if you don't have enough people who are able to travel. So this would add a little buffer to it. Clubs would register with USPSA each season. Teams and athletes could only be affiliated with one club per season. So if you have a club in that season and it doesn't work out, then you're not eligible to start, swapping clubs or anything within the season. The following year you could change. And now the fun part. So this is the biggest advantage, I think, is the roster fluidity between clubs. And there will definitely be some safeguards in place. However, essentially an Ascent athlete can be rostered with an Apex team for an individual event. So let's say that Apex team has only 6 people on their season roster. 2 athletes from the Ascent team then could join the Apex team for a certain event, so they'd have a full bench of 4. So you have 8 athletes going to that event. Um, this would have to be a mutual decision, right? It couldn't just be, I'm choosing you and you're coming with me. It's, hey, talk to the coaches of the Ascent team, talk to the athlete, and like, we'd really like you to play today or next week or whatever. Are you available? That sort of situation. It wouldn't be mandatory. It would just be an option. It could also work out well if, that Apex team, maybe they have 8 and 4 of them are busy doing something, and you don't want to travel with just 4. You could get an athlete from Ascent to join you and have 5, or 2 and have 6 join you for an event. No athlete may play. So the other thing is if both clubs are going to, or sorry, if both teams within the club are going to be at an event, so like at the regionals, the athletes would have to decide which team they want to play for. We don't want athletes bouncing back and forth between teams at the same event. And the assumption is that that ascent level player, after playing on the Apex team for that competition, the assumption is that they return to their ascent team. Now they have the knowledge and the experience that they gained at that event. Some maybe they learned a new play, maybe they learned things that they could share with their teammates, but it's a way to help their ascent team grow and develop as well. Apex moving to ascent rules, so it gets a little dicier when we have our premier, their most elite athletes now jumping down and joining an ascent team. The two ways that this would be permissible would be as if there's a really just a temporary roster shortage. So they all of a sudden they lost a couple athletes, then now they can't. They can only have three. Then with permission from USPSA in advance, they could have one athlete go and join them to so they could have a full roster, and those Ascent players could still participate in their event. The other way, an Apex player a player rostered on that Apex team could play with Ascent within their club would be a permanent roster change. So at that point, they would be ineligible to go back up. But maybe it's a player that's like, I'm not getting enough playing time at Apex. I want to be able to play more, and I think I'd have a better opportunity with with the Associated Ascent team. They could essentially transfer down, and then they're there for the rest of the season and couldn't be called back up. It should be more of a collaborative partnership where Apex supports and mentors the Ascent team, while also Ascent can support Apex as an occasional farm team. So it should be a two-way street. And if it's not working, then that's why we have an opportunity to form a new club the following season. So we want to make sure that it's a good situation for both teams and it's mutually beneficial. Um, this idea never would have come to me, but I do want to give credit to Zach Dickey, who's um, our Eastern Regional Director. He was the one that really championed this whole roster fluidity process. We all worked as a team to kind of make it happen, but this was definitely his baby. But I think it's a really cool way to help grow and develop the sport. Okay, I've been talking a lot. I'm opening up the chat. Again, if I didn't get to your question about a league overview thing, go ahead and ask me, but let's try to focus our questions on Apex classifications and roster fluidity right now. And we'll talk about the rest in a minute here. Oh, we got a big one. Bill, good question. And you came prepared. I like that you just cut and pasted three full questions in here to keep me busy while everybody else is typing. Um, yeah, so hosting three separate events, the whole plan of this then is to spread them out slightly. So we're going to talk about the timing of them and everything, but essentially what we want to do is to be able to build up supports within the region so that we aren't having the same group of people doing all of the things. We want to grow that pool along with this process. So we'll talk about that in a minute. If I don't fully answer it, I don't know how much is in the slides. I can't remember. So go ahead and ask that question again, Bill. Ask number one again if I don't get to it. You said Apex level teams that can't meet the classification requirements of Apex, it's always an option to stay in Ascent. Isn't that kind of unfair to the rest of the teams in Ascent that are there because they're at that skill level? Yeah, and we'll talk about how that looks when we get to the competitive structure of Ascent at the regional classics and nationals and opens and everything. Um, yes, so they will be better than some of those teams, absolutely. I don't think they will be the only teams in that situation. We have some ways to balance it out but we'll get to that. What about teams that don't have another team in their state or within the 150 miles, Rose City, Tidewater, etc.? Why shouldn't they be able to form a club with a team further away? Think Major League, Minor League program. Yes. So that's a really good question. But what happens when teams are farther than 150 miles away? You kind of said it in the question there, right? If they're 150 miles away, how is this going to be a helpful partnership between the two teams? So if they're not able to practice together, if they're not able to show up on, once a week to help mentor the other team, or once a month to help mentor the other team, or if there's no way to kind of go back and forth and actually work together, then I don't want them to be a club. So I think you can do. I get that there's limited athletes, there's limited pools to pull from in different cities, and there might be some cities that have multiple teams, but they're all at Apex or they're all at Ascent, and this won't work out anyway. Um, and frankly, I'm okay with that. I think it's good to build the sport and to encourage teams to encourage teams to try to grow as much as they can and to yeah, and maybe consider splitting. And if you find some athletes it's not full enough for an Ascent team, maybe you do split and have some of them stay at Ascent and have some of them stay at an Apex and build that system that way. Will a minimum number of games be required to participate at regionals? Wayne, great question, and the answer is no. I wanted regionals to be open to anybody that's available, anybody in Ascent or Apex that's available to attend. I understand the point of having minimum game counts throughout the season, and I think that is it's necessary for our current model. What I don't want, and now I would actually be okay with having a minimum for like Apex or something. But right now, no, I want teams to be able to show up at and participate in that event if they are in that region because I want them involved with the development and I want to be able to grow it. That said, with our shortage of referees, Mike McCoy made a really good point to me the other day. He said one of our biggest problems is that the referees that we train don't have any opportunities to practice. So, like we were saying earlier, 9 referees have worked 50% of the matches this year. That means that when we have nearly half of our referees that haven't worked a single match, it's probably because they've been trained, but they haven't had those opportunities to practice and practice and practice, right? Referees that work the outdoor game can get matches anytime they want, and in the winter, maybe they can switch and do futsal or whatever. They stay really busy. The pay is significantly better. So we have a hard time retaining those referees that way as well. So yes, there won't be a minimum game requirement to attend regionals. However, I would encourage teams to play as many matches as they can before that point, um, not only for their own practice, but also to continue to facilitate the growth of our referee pool. How will roster transitions be managed? Who will enforce violations and tournament directors? Yeah, that's a great question. Lisa, thank you for that question about how will we enforce violations. I do think that's something that we need to figure out a little bit more. Obviously, the rosters are going to be showing up on our score sheets, and this is a bit of an aside that I don't think we talked about in any of the other uh, town hall meetings, but there Nathan can speak to this a little bit more too, but we have a system right now that's kind of in prototype mode that is going to be a more online system, so we don't have to have that whole delay of us manually checking all the score sheets and entering all the data and everything. There's going to be more of an option to do that just automatically through an app that has a clock. You can add the goals, all the rosters will preload, so you don't have to worry about handwriting everybody's name and all the everything. So it should be a really cool system, but I think some of that technology we could incorporate some of that in there so that it won't let anybody roster unless it's approved. You said that there would be flexibility on classification and team makeup. What does that look like specifically? Oh, sorry, Brandon, if I didn't say that clear enough. Essentially, sorry everybody, I just turned off the chat for a second so I can catch up. It's like drinking from a fire hose here. So let me get caught up here, and then we'll have more time at the end. But I want to make sure that we're not all here for 3 hours if we don't have to be. Um, so flexibility on classification, the we won't be as flexible on having. So right now you need two PF1s and two sorry, you need at least two PF1s on the court at all times for FIFA. You can't have like three PF2s or anything. So that we're not going to budge on as much. However, if there's an athlete that wouldn't meet the PF2 classification, they'd be, a PF3 doesn't exist, but that's kind of what you can think about. If someone is if someone is classified or isn't classified as a PF2, they don't meet those requirements. We would call them the PF2 plus. That's where the flexibility comes in. So it would be kind of an open, a more open system than FIFA has right now. We would allow more athletes to participate, even if FIFA wouldn't in those situations, but they would still act as a two, not as a one. I guess that's the flexibility. If I didn't answer your question fully, though, let me know. Can you have one team with one team name that plays as both an Ascent team and an Apex team? Just different players on teams in both leagues. Sometimes the players moving up and down is needed. Um, Matt, that's a good question. Right now, no, I would want them to have two separate teams. I want their, so that's why originally we talked about having a season roster and then like that competition roster. So the season roster, those teams would have to be separate, right? I would want to make sure that they have a full season roster, at least four athletes that at Apex and at least four athletes at Ascent. Now you could build up that Ascent team and have more on the Ascent team and then frequently move them up to that Apex team to play. That would be fine. One of our last town halls, they talked about maybe capping that at some point. Maybe you can only do two roster moves per event or whatever, just so it's not like everybody's at that ascent level and dominating at the ascent level, yet they're still also bringing them up to Apex. We want to make sure that nobody's gaming the system. Um, yeah. So that's a good question. I would want them to be two separate teams, though. How many PF1s and PF2s can be on the court at the same time? Perfect. I think I answered that question before I even saw your question. I think you had written it and then I answered it and then I saw it. So yes, there have to be two PF2 or sorry, there have to be two PF1s on the court at all times. There could be three or there could be four, but there has to be at least two. Some teams can barely get 4 to 5 players and don't have other teams near them. How does this Apex Ascent Club model help them at all? So I don't see how that's any different than our current Conference Cup system, right? If they only have 4 or 5 players, then that would be even less of a chance of them being able to commit to traveling to a national tournament. Now, if it's regionals, it still might be a heck of a drive if it's going from one end of the region to the other end of the region. But like I'm thinking central here, we have Texas all the way up through is Ohio as well and Minnesota. Like that's a pretty big range. So if that event is in Texas, there's going to be a lot of transportation down there from the teams that are in Minnesota. But then the next year, maybe it's in Chicago and it's a lot closer, right? So I think this way, instead of having to go to Fort Wayne every year, there would be some more variety. And I think also switching the location of these events would help boost the sport in those different areas. So yeah, I mean, another thing that would be cool about the regional classics is the focus on development. We'll talk about that in a minute, but one of those kind of those breakout sessions or those development opportunities, we could have a whole session on how do you recruit new players, right? Is that going to work across the board for everybody? You're going to get a whole bunch of teams or players? Not necessarily, but I don't see how it's any different right now than it would be with this new model. There's a lot of focus on the structure. Does anything change for in-season matches? Wayne, not a ton. We'll talk about that in a minute, but not a ton. So a player that is brought up to an Apex cannot play in a subsequent tournament for that Apex team. What if the club's Ascent team does not travel as frequently? Uh, Brady, maybe I misspoke or didn't explain it clearly enough, but no, if there's a player that's on Ascent and they get brought up to Apex, they return to their Ascent team for the next competition, but they're still eligible to get pulled again. They can go as many times as they want, but the idea is that they take what they've learned and they help their team, right? So the idea is that it's not like a permanent move. It's not like they're called up to that Apex team and they stay there for the rest of the season. The intent is that they still practice with their Ascent team for the most part, and that's what they could join the Apex team for a practice here and there. But we want it to we want it to benefit both teams. So it wouldn't be as much of a player transfer, yet they would still be eligible to participate on that Apex team multiple times. It's not, or even in, multiple events in a row. That would be okay. But if I didn't answer your question fully or didn't understand your question, please write it again next time. Can we have a copy of the classifications? Thank you, Ginny, for being on that. Are you saying that an Apex team would only be able to call up a player once per season and not be able to send them back down? No, no, no. So yes, and I might have just explained that in my last ramble. Um, oh, that was Nathan. Okay. So no, they can. We will probably have to. the thing with soccer is that everybody finds a way to get to that next level. Um, I was talking to JJ O'Connor a long time ago from Chicago, and he kept using the word special sauce, and I think it's just perfect. Everybody's looking for the special sauce to push their team to that next level, whether it's messing with the chair setting, it's compensation, it's getting the strike force chair, it's getting from going from the rounded strike force chair to the corner, the sharp angle brackets like every time we're just trying to push those limits. We have people messing with battery settings, trying to get more voltage out of their chairs, and like everybody's just looking for that next step. So I feel like eventually the system that was meant to be beneficial to both teams is going to start to be abused. And at that point, we're going to have to start to really think about limits for that. But no, you can call up a player multiple times in the season, multiple events in a row. That's okay. But what we don't want is to have always three athletes that are really strong registered at Ascent so that they can play at Ascent for the regionals or whatever it is. But they spend the whole season playing with their Apex team or whatever it is. We just want to, yeah. So I think we will do a good job balancing it. And when it comes to a problem, we can set limits like, hey, you can only do one athlete per event or two athletes per event to move, that sort of thing. All right. I'm sorry if I cut off the chat for anybody that was still typing. We are going even slower than I wanted to go. So I'm going to start booking it here. I will have more time at the end to answer questions and everything too, and there's going to be a couple more stops in between. But let's talk about the regionals. So these are going to be the marquee events of the USPSA season. We're used to nationals being the thing. The regionals are going to be the thing now, right? It's going to be a really hard mindset change for everybody. But this is that event that brings all of our community together and has that higher level of competition. One big advantage is that the dates and locations will be available at registration. We want to make sure that we know where each of these regionals is happening before the season starts. That way, athletes can prepare, teams can prepare. Likely sometime between late January and mid-April to have all of them. The problem is we don't want them because of our current infrastructure. We don't want them back to back. We can't have them, every weekend from April through May or whatever. But we also need enough time for teams if they do end up qualifying for the national tournament. We need enough time for them to be able to prepare for that. And so this is kind of the window that we landed in. It's not to say that yours will always be in early January or anything, or even late January. It might shift around depending on the venue that we're going to use and that sort of thing. But that's kind of the time frame of these events. So instead of being a summer event, it'll be more of that spring, late winter, or spring. So each region has about 15 to 20 teams in it right now. It'll still be 4 days of competition. In addition to competition, there'd be an all-star match and there'd be development opportunities for everyone. So that includes athletes and coaches and referees, community members, everybody. We'll talk about that in a second. One of the biggest things that I like about this is the ability to have rotating hosts. Okay, so right now, again, Fort Wayne is a remarkable facility. It's served us well for so many years. It's really incredible. It's nice that it's centrally located in the United States. Um, it has four wonderful courts. It has the restrooms that we need. It has the hotels that we've used. It has everything that we needed until this point, until we just outgrew it, right? Um, but with these, if if we're having a third of the amount of teams and we're still keeping it 4 days, we can get this all in with two courts or three courts, right? So this now opens the door to very like a ton more venues that could theoretically support an event like this. Our plan is to partner with LOCs or like local organizing committees, teams, um, organizers that are already putting on big events, right? There are several larger events that happen every single year. Um, and these would be organizations that we would want to partner with. So those organizations already understand where to get the food for catering. They understand which hotels work best. They know the area. That's their expertise. USPSA would be there to help provide the finances for that. Um, but we would rely on those LOCs to be able to facilitate some of the groundwork. That was one of the questions in the chat earlier too, like who's going to be able to do all of this. The hope then is to start not forcing it on people by any means. The USPSA will still be involved with it, but hopefully a lot of the ground operations could be covered by a team that's already doing an event, whether that's, hey, we already have this event. Do you want to use this event as the regional this year? Or it's we have this event, now we can do another event. Sure, why not? We have everything that it takes to do it. Um, Also, having rotating hosts would help spread the visibility of the sport. The again, going back to the community of Fort Wayne, I don't think we've gained too many new athletes by having it in Fort Wayne every single year. I'm not saying we're going to gain it every time we switch to a new city, but I think by spreading it around, we're going to get more local news coverage. We'll ask Enoch, somehow he's got it roped in to be able to get all of the media to show up to his events the very first time he does it, get tons of money donated and everything. So we'll rely on people like him to to figure that out. Sorry to call you on blast there, Enoch, but he did a great job with his event. When was that? Couple month or two ago. Um, so yeah, the I think having the rotating hosts, it would also help distribute the travel burden. Right now, our teams from California are flying to Fort Wayne almost every year, right? Or if they have to drive, it's a multi-day drive. If they can't just get there in one day, it's a big commitment, and it's always the same teams that have to do it. By rotating the hosts, yes, you're still going to have to travel, but maybe next year it's in your backyard. Um, and hopefully it'll be closer by keeping it in the region. Again, the distance between Minnesota and Texas is still huge, and I understand that. But hopefully it will balance out more and distribute that travel burden uh, more, wider. As far as development for athletes, this could be on sport, right? It could be, hey, how do you analyze film? Have someone from Team USA say, look, this is how we break down this international game, so we know like what do we look for? Is it only between the whistles or is it after the whistle? And you see how players set up, is you see what they're doing, that sort of thing. You could have a whole session on the laws of the game or ask a referee, right? There's a huge disconnect between referees and athletes and coaches, and that's something that I've known for forever and want to make use of my director of sports seat right now to work on that, right? To kind of bridge that gap. But I think those opportunities would be really valuable. But it could also be about life. Maybe it's transitioning to college. We could get Zach Dickey to explain everything, right? How do you get care? How do you talk to disability services? How that sort of thing. Or it could be on like assistive technology or things. It doesn't have to just be soccer. This could be part of that community conversation too. Um, Same goes for coaches. I wish coaches knew what a 2-on-1 was. I'm looking at you, Jen, wherever you are. Totally teasing you. I'm just throwing Jen under the bus. Um, The referees as well, there would be an initial referee certification, and this would help. Ideally, we would get more referees in that region to be able to officiate at that event, right? So they get the practice, they get right on the pitch, and they start working. It would also be an ideal opportunity to take those referees that already are certified and give them the support that they need to feel more comfortable doing it alone. So many times we go through the class, and then as I've been teaching this class as well, I realize that people go out there and they're fine when I'm there and I'm able to give them the advice and everything, and then I go away, right? And they're stuck there and they can't remember something and they don't know who to contact, or they don't they're worried about their own skills, and it makes them not want to even referee anymore. Again, the more games we get, the more practice they'll get, but also the more support that we can have with high level officials there to boost those referees that are just maybe just beginning, then the bigger our referee pool will grow. And also for community members. So whether that's talking about the laws of the game for the fans, right? Or it's talking about how do we fundraise? How do we get chairs? How do we do that sort of thing? Or even classifier training. And this year at Nationals, we are planning to have a classifier training. So if anyone wants to become a FITFA certified classifier, please let me know. We'll be sending out an email at some point about that, I'm sure. But on that, so yeah, sorry, sidebar at the national tournament this year, at the Conference Cup this year, on the Wednesday when we usually go to drop off our chairs, that's going to be a time that we are organizing classifiers. So we've I've been having some conversations with the classifiers that are in the United States. We only have a handful of them, um, but we would like to build that base. So ideally, we would have like a Zoom kind of class beforehand. Then you would show up on that Wednesday. We could get athletes classified at the same time while you are also learning to become a classifier and be certified as a classifier moving forward, which will help build our whole inventory of classifiers around the states. Okay, let's talk about the competition structure now. So we had some questions about this in the chat. The round one, so yes, when we break it into regions, we're already it's going to be a smaller pool of teams, right? Versus nationals. So right now we do have those four different conferences, and there is value in that, and I don't want to take away from that. Um, I would also say that the lines between the divisions are getting very blurry. It seems like there are some founders teams that could probably hold their own in champions, and there are some champions teams that maybe would do better in that founders just because of team dynamics, and maybe they've lost some athletes by player transfers or whatever it is. That's yeah. So I think the lines are constantly getting blurry, um, and it's not super equitable from bottom to top. There are some teams that are going to totally clean house. So yes, that as our caveat. Round one would be round robin pool play. We would try to get teams that weren't neighbors already. So we would hope that that pool would be a little bit more diverse, teams that they didn't see all the time, less about the ability for round one. Um, for round two, though, is where it gets a little different. And there's a graphic on the next page, I believe, that will go over this in more detail. But essentially, the round two, instead of grouping it the traditional way, where you have the winner of one pool faces the loser of another pool, and it's just, I mean, it is pairing the best in that division with the worst in that division. Um, for Ascent, it's going to be different. Instead, we're going to group by ability and make brackets that way. I'm actually going to jump ahead. Bear with me here. I'm going to jump ahead to show you what this looks like. So in Ascent, let's say you have three pools. You got 11 teams, pool A, pool B, pool C. Team one went 3-0, team two went 2-1, team three went 1-2. You see how this all works out, right? Essentially, the teams with the most points are at the top. The teams that did the worst are at the bottom. What we would do then is say, hey, these teams, maybe there was a tiebreaker between these two and this one won. These four teams are the best of all of the Ascent teams. Instead of having the very best play the very worst, what we're going to do is group all of those together for their bracket. Okay? All the teams that were in the middle, let's group those together. Now we're going to have the highest level of competition in the second round by the nature of it. It's like taking the finals and multiplying it, or it's jumping right to those semifinals, right? Where you're going to have the closest matches. And then these teams could be together. So we would take those teams and put them right in that bracket. So we'd have this bracket one, we'd have this bracket two, and we'd have this bracket three. Depending on the number of teams, this would look a little bit different. Maybe there's only two brackets. If there was 10 teams, it could be two brackets with five or that sort of thing. But this is how, yeah, this is kind of the idea. It would be this round that would be the the round to kind of look forward to. The finals would be the closest matches of everyone. Are there still teams that are going to lose every single match? Yes, there always are. There are teams that cannot win matches at the level that they're playing, and that's okay. That's part of that's part of sport, right? Are there going to be teams that dominate too? Yes, there will be teams that dominate because that's going to be the case anytime. Um, I think that when we talk about nationals, we'll talk about some of the safety measures in place to keep teams from wanting to return to Ascent after they've shown mastery of that. Um, but yes, that's kind of how that breaks down. With Apex, I'm going backwards. Round one would be round robin pool play based on just snake seeding. So the traditional way that we seed to make sure that there's a lot of diversity in the skill level or the ability level of those teams so that all the top teams aren't ending up in the same pool and then being eliminated from the bracket. Round two would be the traditional one, and that's where that top seed plays the low seed, right? That's when that first round is pretty brutal, unless you're like the 4 and 5 seeds or whatever that play each other. That's usually a pretty good match, but for everybody else, it's pretty one-sided. Um, but if you're choosing to be an Apex, you're choosing to be at that level of competition for better or for worse. So if you didn't show up and make a higher seed in the first round, then you are stuck playing the best team in there. Okay, we talked about all this. Okay, the All-Star match. So at each of these regional classics, there would be an All-Star match. The rosters would be selected based on community vote and not just athletes, not just coaches, but also referees, fans. Anybody who's there would be able to submit a fantasy roster, essentially. They would pick a full lineup of athletes from each league. So you'd have four Ascent team or four Ascent players from any team and four Apex players from any team that you would choose and be like, if I had, my way, it would be these ones. You'd make sure that there was one goalie from each, two wings from each, one center from each. And then based on all of those results, would it be a popularity contest? Yes. And I think that's okay. It's a one-time thing, right? Per region. But this way we'd make sure that there was at least one athlete per team represented, and we'd make sure that each team has athletes for every position. Ginny did a lot of thinking about this, the way that this worked. It was her idea to do the fantasy roster, and I just love it. She wanted to make sure that, as a goalie, she wanted to make sure every team was equipped to have a goalie, right? It'd be no fun to not have a goalie or something. So it is by position as well as by, those other factors. We'd also make sure that each team had the same number of Apex and Ascent players on it. So it would be a mixed league, right? It wouldn't be Apex versus Ascent. It would be a combination. You divide your players. Also, coaches would be selected and referees would be selected based on the vote. The match itself would follow the USPSA laws of the game with a couple stipulations. So first of all, every athlete would have to play at least 10 minutes. And each team would always have to have two or more Ascent athletes on the pitch. So this would be kind of like the classification version, right? There could be no more than two Apex athletes on the court at a time. There could be three Ascent players or four Ascent players, but um, there would have to be at least two. Okay, it's kind of a fun component at least. Some of the frequently asked questions. Isn't this more of a financial burden? There's, I think there's so many different ways to think about it. So could it be, I could see why you would think it's more of a financial burden, yes, because if you make regionals and then you're also eligible to make it to nationals, that's committing to traveling to two different events. Um, However, a question to think about or to consider is how many mid-season events does your team currently attend? Are you already going out of state and staying in a hotel room to compete for a day throughout the season and then also going to nationals? If that's the case, then that's the same, right? Like you're going out of state to go to your regional, maybe, or maybe it's in state. Plus you may be eligible to make it to nationals and do the same thing. Another thing is that your LOC can also host. If you want to be close to home, you can host. We would love that. Another thing that we haven't talked about a ton yet as an organization is this Innovate to Grow grant. So Nathan applied for a grant through US Soccer, and was awarded a nice chunk of money for USPSA. So thank you, Nathan. Is it a 3-year thing? Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yep. 3 year
cool.
thing. Yep. Yep.
So it's a 3-year thing, and so every year we'll get a certain allocation of money that we can spend, but it's only for development of the sport. So um, we can't use it for business as usual. We couldn't use this to support the Conference Cup in its current structure, but we can use it for any sort of development, whether that's growing the referee base or it's expanding to new teams. It's getting some equipment, some trial equipment that someone had suggested on one of these to have like a bank of Strike Force chairs in the region where if you're going to do a clinic someplace, you could have those chairs to go do that. We don't have quite enough money to get a whole bank of Strike Force chairs in every region, unfortunately, but that's the sort of thing that we could use this money for. So, um, will it, the hope then is that if US soccer is able to, is giving us some of this money that we can spend towards development, USPSA can spend some of that development money at these regional events to help offset some of the costs for the athletes as well. Um, are there still going to be expenses of hotel, that sort of thing? Yes, obviously that those are going to be there. Um, but we're going to see what we can do to reduce the cost of, like we have that Conference Cup deposit, whatever the equivalent would be for the regional. Um, my looking, I mean, we'd have to dive deeper into the numbers, but from what I've kind of gotten my hands on it, I'm guessing that it will be less expensive for teams to attend the regional event than it will be for the nationals. Now there are three of them, so for USPSA there's going to be a little bit more of an expense, but that Innovate to Grow grant is going to be able to offset a lot of the development. So the development would include things like having the time and space for that all-star match, for having the referee training, for that sort of thing. And the more referees that we can grow within that region, the less we're going to have to be flying across the country and putting up in hotels and that sort of thing. So um, it's an investment for hopefully a more longer term gain. Another huge drawback that we keep hearing is, so I'll never get to see my friends from the other side of the country. Um, and at the regionals, that's true, right? It's for your region. That's not to say that you will never see people again, right? There's always opens, which we'll talk about, and you're able to go to any open that you can. If you qualify for nationals, it's another experience. But there's also experiences like Power Soccer Camp, things like that you can do in addition to what you're already doing with your team. Um, I will put a quick plug for Power Soccer Camp because that's how I got my start with the sport in when was that 2008, so a long time ago. This year, they finally have finished constructing their new gym facility, so there'll be two full courts there. So we're hoping to open up way more beds for Power Soccer Camp. But usually, I think it was fully booked within a couple hours of the email going out last year. So hopefully this year we can have that many more beds. We'll talk to Steve about that, see what he has planned. It's still his baby, so I'll let him take over there. But yes, that's the plan. We can have more community. The other thing is that the classics, even though you might not, if you live in California, you might not see your friends from New York at your regional classic. Um, it's not void of community. There's other ways to connect with those people, but you're also going to be having a lot more community and a lot more intentional community building opportunities at these regionals. Does that make sense? So by having some more of these intentional opportunities to ask questions to referees, to have those sessions on, hey, how do I get to college? By being more intentional rather than just having those conversations on the sidelines, I feel like it's going to build community even more. And that was one of the things that um, none of us, like going back to that word cloud, none of us want to give up community. We needed to be really intentional throughout this whole process of how do we retain that. And this is kind of how we were able to do that going forward. Why not just split the current conference cups? Talked about it already, and Bill already yelled at me for only talking about this. But if we silo competition through ability groupings, I think it's going to be really bad for teams. If we split this up and say, hey, founders here, premier here, now there's no, I mean, yes, you can watch them on YouTube or whatever, but if you're not able to talk to athletes from a different division, what's that going to do to the sport? If you're not able to work, or even as with the All-Star game, to be able to play side by side with those teams, what's going to happen? So I don't think that's the solution for long term. Like Jenny said in the chat too, it's a band-aid. It could work for a little while, but the more we grow, it's going to cause a bigger problem. Just the operational strain as well. So scheduling, staff, volunteer availability, referee shortage. If we kept it in the summer and had it in back-to-back weeks or even 1 week apart, um, that's going to be a lot more strain on our referees, on our volunteers. If it's at the same venue, then we're also relying on the same people that are on the ground there for two consecutive events. If it's at a different venue, that would be similar to more of the regional model, but there's still going to be that problem of now flying in all the referees to be there or whatever. And because it's in the summer, even if we did do a referee training, there wouldn't be an opportunity to have those referees get right back out on the court until the following season. So now they're going to be sitting there doing outdoor games and all the other things that they might be doing. And by the time it comes back to the season, they're not ready to referee matches, and then we will have spent that money to train them, and then they're gone. With this model, if we're having these regionals every 3 weeks or whatever it is, we can train them at the first event, and we can invite them to the second event. Even if they're not the best referees in the world, we could train them even more at that second event, get them ready, send them back to the region, and now they have it. Now their feet are underneath them. And just the scalability. Like Jenny was saying, it's a band-aid. We couldn't grow forever. What if they're like teams per conference? There were supposed to be 10. If we kept it to that, founders would have 18 this year. Would that be fair to founders teams to have 18 teams? No, it wouldn't. Not only because of the number, but also because of the difference in ability there. So yeah. And how many conferences? We could split it. We could have 5 conferences, 6 conferences, 8 conferences, 12 conferences. Um, it would get to the point where it would be so divided across the country with 10 in this one and 10 in this one and 10 in this one. It would take you 12 years to go from the worst, from the lowest level of competition to that highest level of competition. Okay, I've talked a lot. I'm sorry. I know it's super late. I'm going to turn on the chat again, let you ask anything about the regional classics. The next parts aren't quite as long, so we can go in there. Brandon's ready. If we don't qualify for nationals, our season ends. Feels like we'd be losing a few months of tournament playtime. How do we ensure that we're getting to truncate the season? If we do qualify and can't afford to choose or not to go with the fourth place team taker spot. Good questions, Brandon. I'm going to hold off for a second because we're going to talk about national qualifications here in a minute. There is something that's going to be a wild card, and that's based on season performance. So that should kind of answer both your questions. You can continue to earn points towards wild card even after your regional. Um, Assuming it's one of the earlier regionals, at least at some point, we're going to have to cut it off. And essentially, what would happen then is that instead of having the fourth place team, it would be the team that like the next wild card place would get to go. Why are Indiana and Ohio in the central region and not in the eastern region? Will there be a restriction on how often a city or venue can host a regional event? Will there be a cost difference between the nationals currently and the regional classics? Grant, the cost difference, like I was saying, I, I'm almost positive that it's definitely not going to be more. And my hope is that it's actually going to be less than the current conference cup deposit and everything to attend the regional. I want to make sure it's as accessible as possible. So we are going to try to maximize that Innovate to Grow grant to make it more accessible. Will there be a restriction on how often a city or venue can host a regional event? No, nothing is in the works right now. If it has to be 2 years back to back because nobody is able to submit a bid that for anything better in the same city, then that's what it's going to be. Why are Indiana and Ohio in the central region? That I'm not going to get into that. I didn't do any of that, but that's the way it shook out. Um, Michigan. Who would be responsible for finding venues, hotels, et cetera, and vetting those venues for regionals and nationals to ensure they can handle the needs of teams and players? Great. Um, Murray, that's a fantastic question. So we've actually had some conversations already with some teams that are already hosting larger events to see if they'd be interested in either having their event be the regional or of hosting an additional event that is the regional for their region. So ideally, USPSA does the helps USPSA would take over most of the scheduling for games, coordinating all of the schedules, the different development opportunities, talking to the classifiers to make sure they're there and that sort of thing. And we would rely on those hosts. Eventually, we'll have some sort of a bidding process for this first year, assuming this does pass and we are going to do this. The first year, we're really going to have to work. We are going to have to approach teams, I think, to make sure that we're ready for it. But then we would open up the bidding process so that other teams could submit their bid and be able to be that host. Um, Hope that answered that first question. If we don't have referees for 2 nationals, then how will we have the referees to cover 3 regionals and a national tournament? That's an excellent question. Again, if we are hosting those referee clinics and giving them opportunities to not only learn the game, but also practice the game and have 4 days of competition to do so, alongside some of those most elite referees in the country, hopefully they're going to get their feet underneath them. And like I said earlier, we can ask those new referees, even though we usually just say, hey, you're a really good referee from Atlanta, and we're going to pull you all the way over to California for this event because we need good referees. What I would want to do with this model is, hey, we train someone in, the East Coast, and they started to do pretty well, but we don't want them sitting forever. So for this next regional, and maybe it's in the Central or maybe it's in the West, we would want to pull that new referee, get paid for their expenses to go and ref, even though they're not maybe the most premier referee yet. We want to get them that extra experience, get their feet underneath them, so that they can go back to their region and be that high level referee in that region, be that resource for other referees in that region. So we would want to grow the referees that way. Again, it's an initial investment, and then hopefully we would help solve some of this problem with referees. This isn't the only solution for referees by any means. We need to do more. But this could be a baby step in that direction. How will the ITG grant actually tangibly be used to offset and reduce costs for athletes and their families in regards to travel? If you told us, yeah, no, so it won't offset their travel. Sorry, I'm reading this whole thing from Bill. So Bill is asking how can the ITG grants be used for travel? Right now, they can't be. But what they can be used for is by taking this event that you are usually paying for the whole gym space, all of the food, all of the everything for a 4-day event at nationals. And that cost is then, you know, divided and shared with the teams. The idea is, hey, we are going to have 2 days worth of competition over a 4-day event, right? Half of this event is development. We can take ITG funding to pay for some of the event itself to reduce the cost for the athletes that are going to be there. I think by relying on some of the LOCs that might have connections with the gyms and things already, they it might also reduce the cost. So there's some facilities I'm thinking of, like Arizona, they have their tournament in January usually at Ability 360, but they own that facility. So if we were going to partner with them to have that event, the rental rate of that facility would likely be significantly reduced versus going and renting out through community education or whatever, renting out a facility. So there's a couple ways to save finances on the actual event, which would then reflect in a less money to pay up front for teams to attend. But no, the travel expenses at this point can't be covered. I will say Brett has some good ideas about how to help offset some of the travel costs of things. I don't think it's fully developed yet, and I'll let him talk about that at a different time. But he has actually been working on something that I think is pretty cool. Um, I have a question regarding the time of year that the regionals would be held. Has there been thought about how this would affect with school age athletes? Yes. Um, Students at high school miss more than 7 days of the semester, they lose their credit for the class. Would they possibly with 3-day regionals? Like it also be difficult for parents and working athletes as well. Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Mandy. She's just essentially saying, how does this impact our kids and those that are working and that sort of thing? Traditionally, yes, we have this event in the summer. I was just looking at the numbers before we jumped on this call because I wasn't prepared for it at yesterday's meeting. We have about that 400 athletes and about 100, what did I say, Jenny? 120-ish, somewhere in there. About 120 or 18 or younger. So the majority of them are older. I didn't get into the whole college age, whatever. Um, so that is a thing. Those of you that don't know me, I am a teacher. So I'm a special education teacher, primarily at the elementary level, but also through high school. Um, yes, and I do understand the importance of attendance. I also understand that schools have been really pushing for better attendance, that sort of thing. Um, However, I also know that kids miss school all the time for things that will enrich their lives, right? I think I've talked on every town hall so far about hockey in Minnesota. Hockey's a big thing. And for whatever reason, ice time after 4 p.m. just is like not available or whatever. So there are so many kids that miss multiple Fridays throughout the hockey season. It's like every Friday they're not going to be at school because they're going to be playing hockey or they're leaving early or they're getting, whatever it is. I think there are athletes that like student athletes that miss school a ton more than our power soccer athletes ever do. I'm not saying that it's ideal, but I do think it's flexible. This was actually one of my biggest concerns coming into it, and the rest of the team had to kind of talk me off the ledge a little bit. And I can kind of see what they're saying this way. But no, I get school has to come first. The beauty of also knowing exactly where and when that regional classic will be by the time that registration opens. Again, registration, I don't know if I said this yet today, but instead of being the November registration, we're really pushing to make that earlier, whether that, maybe beginning to middle of September to open up the registration process so that we would be able to get rolling with games and things a lot sooner. But yes, knowing, hey, this event is going to happen in March might help athletes prepare to work ahead in their classes or whatever. But yes, it is a significant concern. I get that. If a regional tournament was scheduled and extreme weather prevented, yes. Talking about extreme weather preventing things from happening, like at the Mule Cup this year, that was turned into kind of a disaster and a lot of teams had to drop out. That is my nightmare. I will tell you that. I think what um, we would have to make some accommodations there. So I'm not exactly sure, Rich, what that would look like. I think we could rely more. Another big part of our restructuring thought was we wanted to add validity to the rest of the season, not just, hey, let's get our 8 games in so we can go to nationals, but let's make those games mean something. And when we talk about the wild cards, we can talk more about that. But that is something that I think would be really a useful thing as well, is to have the I mean, if heaven forbid something does come up and teams can't attend, there are still those wildcard opportunities, and maybe we monkey with those a little bit, or we have some sort of a supplemental event. I'm not exactly sure what the answer would be. I'd love your suggestions. What if an individual player wants to go to regionals to get the training portion, but the rest of their team cannot attend regionals? Wayne, that's entirely allowed. Yep, totally. If a single player, maybe from a rec team or from a even from an ascent team, their whole team can't make it, but they want to show up, that would be fantastic. And as with everything, there's always exceptions. So if there's a player that needs to do a last minute change because maybe there's another team that's going to be short a player or whatever, I would be totally comfortable having that player join them or whatever on a case by case. I mean, I wouldn't want to make a whole rule of that, but on a case by case situation, that might be beneficial for everyone. I want athletes to be able to play and to be able to grow and learn. Just putting this out there, NWBA has many more teams, but ranks teams throughout the season, top 16 teams in each division. To compete nationals, get to keep, yeah. Yep. Um, yeah, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but NWBA is a little more structured in their events and their season is a little more scripted, where in power soccer, it's more you show up to the tournaments that you want to, and that's it. Where I believe in NWBA, there's a schedule, right? I'm looking at those that Audrey's giving me a subtle head nod. So the one thing we have to worry about with point systems is teams that are in close proximity to other teams farming points. Oh, Bill's jumping on. He's shaking his head. There's not a set schedule. Is that what you're telling me? We could talk about it at the end here. Well, I want to make sure we get to the rest of this. We're already an hour and a half in. USPSA be vetting the venue. Yes. Most of the mid-season tournaments in Central Region are done using a school or local college gyms. Have been you inquired currently hosting, believe they could get a facility for 4 days running in January through April. We may struggle to get 4 days in those facilities. Yeah. Um, yep. Good thing to consider. Okay. I'm going to keep plowing through. I'm sorry it's getting super late. Bill, I want to get to your question because I see your head shaking vigorously. I can tell how angry you are. Okay, let's go. The new nationals, it's going to be much smaller and much shorter. Think like a 2 day, it's only competition. You show up, you compete, you go home. There's not this, we're not having referee trainings here. We're not having community events. There's not a social. This is the most elite. At least for Apex, it's the most elite. They're showing up to compete and then to go home. It's nobody that isn't making national. I mean, it's an honor to make nationals. Nobody that doesn't make nationals is going to be missing out on a ton of development opportunities other than the opportunity to see other athletes from around the country. There would be 24 total teams. So from each region, there would be 4 Apex and 4 Ascent players. There are 4 Apex and 4 Ascent teams that would make it. The invitation would be earned through performance. And again, just focused on the competition. The structure would mirror the regional classics the same way, where Apex would be more of a traditional bracket, and the Ascent would be kind of that multiple bracket situation. Now, there was some questions about, hey, what prevents Ascent teams from just dominating and going to nationals every year? This is it. So if Ascent teams enter that upper bracket at nationals, you know how we had that visual of it ended up having 3 different brackets at the nationals. It could be 3 or it could be 2. But any teams that from Ascent that make it into that top level bracket at nationals would be ineligible for nationals at Ascent for the following season. So that means they could register as an Apex and make it there, or they could stay at Ascent and not go to nationals. Then it would just go to the next place team or the next wild card. Um, Yep. Okay, let's talk qualifications. For Ascent, um, the regional classic round two winners would be the ones that go first and foremost. So again, when that broke down into three different pools, we had the top four teams from pool play. Those of those four teams, the top team of those would go. Okay. That next bracket would be kind of that middle of the road group, some that won a couple games, lost a couple games, whatever it was. The winner of that could also be eligible to go. And then at the lowest level, the ones that maybe lost all of their games, then were all grouped together. The winner of that would also be eligible. So it's not the top four teams from Ascent. It would be the top from each of those regroup brackets. That way, it would enable teams that are at that beginning level to still have that opportunity to make it to nationals. Um, For Apex, it would just be the straight top three finishers that would be eligible. So in your region, if you finish first, second, or third, you qualify for nationals. It's Apex is the most elite league. They're going to play by those rules. So that's what you get into if you're not going to be super competitive at Apex, then you're not going to make it to nationals, but that's okay. There's also a wildcard option through opens, and we'll talk about that now. So opens are essentially mid-season tournaments that are larger. It's not just a league day where you have three teams and they each play each other once and everybody goes home. This would be a bigger event where there's at least five teams in the same league. That could be five Ascent teams or seven Ascent teams or whatever. That would be an Ascent Open. Or it could be for Apex. There could be seven Ascent or Apex teams. If there was three Apex and two Ascent, even though there's five teams, there's not five from one league or the other, so that would not be an open. Um, the way the reason we have it this way is to really designate tournaments that are larger and to reward teams that are doing well at larger events versus teams that are playing, random pickup games on the weekend and just farming points. Um, Part of the stipulations of opens is that they must be posted at least 90 days before the event or by the first day of the season if you're going to be, if the season starts in September and you want to have an open in November, that's fine as long as it's posted before the first day of registration. The date can't conflict with any regional classic. It should be live streamed with or without commentary, and have USPSA certified or approved referees for every position. And the competition structure should also mirror the classics. So for Apex, it'll be a pool play and then a bracket. For Ascent, it would be pool play followed by multiple brackets. For points, for both leagues, though Ascent would have multiple point winners here. The first place would be 5 points, second place would be 3 points, and then two for third place. Anybody else that shows up does get a point for fourth through last. Now, if there was only three teams in an Ascent bracket, that's fine. They would just get 5, 3, and 2. And again, Ascent would have multiple winners. And someone in the chat was asking about other events. Keep happening, right? Just get as much practice as you can get throughout the season is awesome. You won't get points for them for wildcard placements or anything. We want to reward those teams for competing at a higher stage versus just playing their neighbor. That also helps for landlocked teams. Like I always bring up Colorado because I think they might be the most geographically landlocked team. I know there are other teams that have similar situations, but Colorado is really far away from any other team. Um, I guess Enoch, you up there, you're pretty far away from everybody too. So that could be another with Rose City. It's not fair for Rose City to have to get if there's two teams in California that are right next to each other and can play each other every weekend, that's not fair for a team like Enoch. They would have to travel every single time to get any matches. So yes, it's only, but that said, continue to have those matches. It's totally fine. It would count towards your season statistics and everything, win-loss count. We'd like you to post it to the website and everything, but you wouldn't have to meet that 90-day in advance threshold or anything for those pickup games or for those smaller events, league days, that sort of thing. All right, I've been talking at you for what has it been, an hour and a half already? Sorry. I'm gonna open it up for some more questions here now. Um, we are just about done. We have to talk about the next steps here, and then I'll stick around for as long as we need to answer your questions. But let's ask things about nationals, opens, other competitions right now, and we'll go from there. All right. For Ascent National qualification, what is stopping a team from intentionally losing its games in the round robin to qualify for the easy group and then going on to win that group to qualify for nationals? Yeah. So there is a little provision that we have in there about sandbagging. And essentially, if the board feels like you are gaming the system, you're not eligible for nationals. It would be one of those kind of um, there would be a grievance process for that. There's no place in this sport for that. So if you're going to try to sandbag and purposefully lose games that you should be more competitive in, then we don't want you at nationals anyway because you don't represent USPSA. How will games between Ascent and Apex team be handled? Rule set, yes. Great question, Brandon. Thank you. So we would encourage teams to play teams in other leagues. If an Ascent team wants to play an Apex team, I think that's fantastic, and they're allowed to. They wouldn't count for an open, so you can't get any like points necessarily, but for just for games, you can do that. You would follow the Ascent. So USPSA laws of the game um, for play. However, we still want that Apex team to follow the classification rules because they signed up as Apex, right? If you're going to be an Apex team, you're going to play as an Apex team no matter who your opponent is. So they would still have to follow those classification rules, even though they're playing down at a Ascent team level, if that makes sense. What if a premier level teams must register as Ascent because they cannot fulfill the classification requirements? Yeah, so that could happen, and that probably that might happen, right? So there will be some really good teams at that Ascent level, but they can only make that national tournament once, then, right? Because they would then be ineligible the following year because they'd be in that upper bracket at nationals. I get it's not a perfect system. We currently have 12 Premier teams. I imagine not all of them will be able to become Apex teams because of the lack of PF1 teams. How will they be able to have opens if there are less than 7 Apex teams within a reasonable driving distance? So all it takes is 5 for an open. So as long as you have 5 teams, it's considered an open. Um, the I think there, I mean, again, these events would have to be posted 90 days in advance and that sort of thing. So I'm thinking about some of the bigger tournaments that we have already. I know Turnstone has usually a couple of them, and I'm not sure anybody. I didn't go to it either of them this year, but I do think they get a pretty large number of teams that go to them. Arizona's pulling in at Ability 360, will pull in 10 to 12 teams, that sort of thing. So if because they're posted along and far enough in advance, I think teams will travel to them. If there's an issue of one team backing out at the last minute or whatever, they were supposed to be 5 and you only end up with 4. I mean, case by case, right? We would give the teams the points for that. Not very many venues have the ability for live streaming, forecourts, etc. Yeah. So I think some of the Innovate to Grow grant could be used. We'll have to talk to Nathan about that. I know he's had some ideas about how to get live streaming equipment to those events. He had an idea of live streaming every single Apex game, no matter what, as well. I think that was you, right, Nathan? I don't know. I've had too many conversations about this, but yes, he's nodding. That's a logistical barrier, but I think it's one that we can overcome. The reason we want the live streaming is for the visibility of the sport, and so that everybody can see what's happening, right? We want that to grow. Why are we punishing Ascent teams for not letting them participate in nationals the year after they go in the higher bracket? If an Ascent team is good but does not have enough PF1s to go into Apex, why should they be punished for that? They're not necessarily punished. I mean, we want to push teams to grow and expand, and if there are some things that they can control, and there's some things that they can't, and I understand that. But we also need that to be more fair for all of the other teams in Ascent. I think I had mentioned that we had originally thought about having a third league, and that could be a possibility eventually. And we could try to lock teams into that more, but I don't see it so much as I mean, I see that as an encouragement to get more PF1s and to play by those rules. I think some of the teams that'll do it might actually have the PF1s, but would rather play their PF2s. And that's a different problem. Your response to my IDG grant question was unfortunately predictable. You've mentioned some great ideas for how it's going to save USPSA money, but given none for how it's going to save athletes, their families' money. yet in your own slide presentation, use it as justification for why additional events may not be more costly for families. I love and appreciate all of you. You said I'm angry. I'm not angry. I just enjoy this. I see. Um, Bill loves stirring the pot. So no, yeah, it's not going to reduce travel costs. It's not going to at this point. It's not going to reduce travel costs. It's not going to reduce the cost to stay in a hotel to drive someplace, that sort of thing. However, the less money it costs USPSA is the less money they charge for the actual event. That Conference Cup deposit itself is $500, I think, right? Plus however much I can't even remember what the total is per athlete or team by the end of it to attend the Conference Cup. If we can reduce that, that is one financial barrier that we can help take care of. If we're using these funds for growth and development of our infrastructure too, of referees, of that sort of thing, that's less referees that we're flying in. And again, the more things that USPSA does that cost money, the more we have to shift that onto the teams and athletes. And we want to try to reduce that. So if we can use this money to build up a pool of referees that we can rely on to have it within the regions and to not have to fly them across the country, I would love to have more referees than we have teams. That would be fantastic. We need that. Um, but until we get to that point, we're going to have to invest in it. So yes, it's not an immediate overnight fix, and this money isn't going to go directly from the Innovate to Grow grant into the pockets of athletes. And I don't want to portray that. But I think it is a way to help reduce some of the costs. It's not in its entirety. I think keeping it in the region, like I said, it might be the teams that are in Indiana probably don't mind having it in Fort Wayne every year, no matter what. It's a pretty short drive for a lot of them. Where again, the team from Syracuse is driving for forever. The team from I don't know, from anywhere, NorCal, SoCal, everywhere, has to drive forever to get to Indiana. So again, that would distribute the travel burden, not necessarily make things cheaper for everyone, but it would help spread that out so it's cheaper every third year or whatever it is when it's closer to them. So we could debate about this for a while, but I'm going to move on, Bill. We can talk about this on the podcast. Just putting this out there, as many more teams, but ranks. Wait, am I lost? I thought we read this already. Top 16 teams in each division get to descriptions. Oh yeah, I'm way behind. Isn't the point system for opens unfair to teams that can't afford to go to a bunch of them? So Bill, yeah, there is always that concern, and that's why the majority of them happen at the pinnacle of the season, which is the regional classic. So the majority of those spots, the first three in Apex, and likely at least two, if not three, at Ascent, those are going to be divvied out based on performance at their regional event. So that's encouraging people to go to that pinnacle, which is essentially the reformation of nationals, right? That's the regional. They're still a nationals, but it's something different, right? It's totally different. So I don't think it's necessarily. Um, I mean, we need to make the season valuable. And I think it only makes it worse if every game was worth points or whatever. This is a way to limit it to just certain events that that have the ability to travel at least could do that. It also doesn't limit teams from hosting their own open. So if there's a team that can't travel but has a facility and could host an open, it's 5 teams. They could find 4 other teams in their league to host it for themselves. And now they don't have to do the travel, and that is not an expense for them. So you guys committing now to tournament registration costs going down. Bill, that's my goal, absolutely. Um, I, I yeah, until we get the bids back from the facilities that we're working with, I couldn't tell you with certainty. Um, but that I'm going to strive for that. Thank you for the amount of detail and consideration you've given this. You're very articulate and seem passionate about the sport. Unfortunately, this model feels very complex and positions the league to allow for roster poaching and attrition under the supervision of a gray or subjective oversight procedure. Long term, this model rewarding skilled players and stacked teams over grassroots teams development is detrimental to the sport growth. Okay. I mean, we can, I appreciate your recognition of how much time and consideration has gone into this. Um, I don't see it that way, Lisa, and I would like to have some more conversations with you about that to pick that out a little bit. Um, Yeah, if you don't mind sticking around, or I can reach out to you separately. Sounds like this is more of a referee issue. Is this the only fix the board? No. Yeah, it's partly a referee issue. That's the current you know that's the biggest thing that's like throbbing right now. But it's more than that. It's more about sustainable growth. So the our looking at the different options for how we could keep our conference system won't sustain growth by the time we get to more and more teams. There's not a way that we can make that happen. And that's my goal. I mean, it's not my goal to not make things happen. It's my goal to have more growth, right? I would love to have twice as many teams as we have now. Um, if we have twice as many teams, what does that two nationals look like now? Now, is it four nationals? And what does that mean for teams? Is it um, you're still not getting together with everyone, right? Maybe I'm misunderstanding or not seeing it the same, but yeah. Bottom line, we appreciate this board investing so much time and thinking to best. Thank you. Within the US, is there a minimum of PF1s in games that could be solved the problem of teams good enough to play an Apex forced into Ascent? So, Connor, that's an interesting point. So yes, there has to be two PF1s on the court. They can have as many PF1s as they want on their team, on their roster. If they only have two, those two are going to be playing every single minute of every single match. The thing I also kind of like about it though is that it could take some of those Ascent teams that might have some strong PF1s and push them into Apex and have them compete against teams that they couldn't compete against right now, right? So if there are some teams at the premier level that aren't following classifications because none of them are because they don't have to, right? So if there are some teams that are having those higher, those PF2s out there for the full time, and those teams that maybe are in that champions level right now, there's no way they can compete with it. But now, if you take those teams that are at that highest level and say, "Hey, you have to have two PF1s on the court," that might make them less able to uh, play their game, right? That adds that new layer of complexity that maybe that champions team is already playing with three PF1s on the court at all times, and they're really good. So I think it would actually add more parity that way too. Was an alternative for nationals to consider something like how to able-bodied soccer is conducted in England with having conferences and more divisions for competitive and semi-competitive teams. Um, yeah, so there's been a lot of chatter about the amount of travel and things that has to happen, right? The more we take the the national approach and we start adding different components into that, that's more people traveling more places more and more times. So Grant, you're saying 8 total divisions, 4 competitive and 4 semi-competitive. Um, if that's across the country, now we're going to be so let's say there's that 8 divisions. We have right now about 50 teams committed to travel. So that's about 6 teams per division. Those 6 teams are going to be far apart. Like they're going to have to play each other throughout the season, which means they're going to have to travel more throughout the season to play each other. So the more that we cut that into pieces, the more that's going to add up the costs. I know that like already Northern Lights for a while has had some trouble committing to traveling to tournaments, right? Um, I think that would only exacerbate the issues. Even if they're at that competitive level, they're going to have to be doing that much more traveling. That having to steal PF1s from Ascent teams just to play Apex would harm the Ascent teams. I know there are a couple of specific Premier teams. I'm not going to name which ones that I don't think have any PF1s. Okay. When we went through the list, I mean, I'll have to double check our notes for that. Um, we weren't significantly worried about a lot of the Premier teams right now. Not to say that that's not the case. It sounds like you know for sure that there are some. So we can have those conversations. I would like to hear um, and submit that in the feedback too, please. Can't survive much longer. I want to say I don't like a fair amount of what's proposed. I'm going to debate the heck out of George in the podcast next week. Awesome. Thanks, Bill. Yeah, as I said, we're not going to please everyone. And no plan is going to be perfect in the minds of everyone. So Okay, I'm shutting off the chat for just a second to talk about next steps. So sorry it got so late. I spent too long on that last section here. I will stick around longer, but I do want to make sure that everybody knows we want to collect feedback. We want to be able to fine tune this, make revisions where it's necessary. I realize that I'm getting, like, as the sun is setting, I'm getting this weird color right now. I apologize. I would go turn on the light, but I don't want to waste any more time. Um, at the end of the day, this is going to require a vote by the AGM. So we do need a bylaw update. My suggestion, though, is this is a brand new thing. We need to do change. We need to find something that works because we are running full speed ahead into a brick wall. Um, our our community is fantastic about adapting and making things work, and we've adapted and made nationals work, and we're going to do it again this year, right? Um, but we got to read the writing on the wall too, and we know that the best time to start changing something is before we hit that brick wall. We need to put something in place. So the way that I'm thinking about this and that the team has kind of agreed to is to make this a 3-year plan. So this would be something that it wouldn't totally change all of our bylaws. It would be kind of an addendum to our current bylaws that already outline all of our conferences and that sort of thing. It would be more of an addendum to that would last for 3 years to follow a structure like this. This allows kind of a trial period, and it still keeps us with a nice safety net at the end. So something we could fall back to if at the end of the 3 years we would have to come up with another vote. It would either be yes, this is the plan that works. We like this. Let's move forward with this. Or if we don't vote on it, then it fizzles out, and we fall back to what's currently in the bylaws with our conference structure, and we piece that together and find an alternative method. We still couldn't have everybody under the same roof. But we could see what we could do to work within that structure until we find something different. Now, is it going to look exactly the same every year? Probably not. Just like these town halls started, we started with an open chat the whole time, and it was a nightmare. And we adapted and we made something better so that we could communicate more effectively and we could answer more questions appropriately. That's what we're going to have to do with this plan as well. So if this is voted in yes, what we're going to have to do then is give it a go for a year. Is it going to be totally smooth sailing? Absolutely not. I wish it could be. That's our goal, obviously. But there are going to be some bumps. But by the time year 2, year 3 rolls around, hopefully we have enough of those ironed out that we can really determine, is this a model that works for us or is this not? And then there would be a much more informed decision. Right now, this is all hypothetical. We haven't tried it yet. I would love to try it, and I wouldn't be advocating so hard for this if I hadn't spent so much of my time thinking about alternatives and thinking about why they would and would not work. Uh, this was a culmination of months and months of work with some of the I mean a ton of different brains in the sport from coming from different angles. So from what we've come up with, this is the only reason I'm pushing this is because I think this is our best option forward at this point. However, I'm a representative of our organization, and I'm represented by being voted in. So I care so much about what everybody else is thinking too. So if this isn't the plan for everybody, then it's not the plan, and we find something else. I personally wouldn't have invested as much time of my own into this if I didn't think it had a chance. Um, however, we're here to do what's best for the organization, and that's why it needs to have an AGM vote. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm gonna open up the chat again. I'm gonna go turn on the lights while you guys are typing, and I will be right back. I'll stick around for a while. Good, Wayne. I'm glad you got your popcorn ready for the Three in the Box episode.
George, I just want to jump in here and say thank you once again. This has been absolutely awesome. I love the engagement in the chat. You guys have been so great. I think every town hall has gotten better and better with the amount of questions, the engagement. Keep the questions coming to us. As George said, we want to make this plan and the future of our game something special, something great, and that sometimes requires a little bit of change, a little bit of pain, but I just want to say thank you again to everybody here. Like George said as well, we'll be staying on for a little bit, but I really can't thank George and the team enough. You guys have been awesome. I know that we put a lot of work into this for the future of our game and to make something awesome and something cool. So um, this this plan is complex. We've spent 2 hours talking about it, but it's a pretty great plan for everybody in our sport. So I just want to say thank you again.
So Brandon and Wayne had a very similar question about how more information is going to be communicated. Sorry, thanks, Nathan. So I just jumped right in because I trying to make this go fast. Um, so we have a plan that ended up being about 26 pages or something like that, and it was confusing, and that's why we opted for more of a town hall method where we were able to explain our thinking behind everything first, and then yes. So we also want to make sure that we got your feedback. So we are going to send out a Google form to collect more of your feedback. We've been taking some notes and things throughout the town halls about some things that we could tweak a little bit to make more sense. But we do want your feedback. We want to be able to review that before sending out the full proposal. But hopefully within the next week or so, we'll get the actual proposal out that's in that written format for you to kind of digest a little bit more. Um, Lisa, thank you. I'll have to reach out to you. David, can I ask why this isn't a priority to get power soccer to be recognized by the IOC as a Paralympic sport? Um, Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be really cool, but I think we can't go chasing rainbows, right? So if what we are doing that's best for our sport also gets us, accredited by the IOC IPC, I think that's fantastic. But I don't want to veer too far from the path of what we think is best for our sport in order to get that extra layer of recognition. We are, at the end of the day, one country. This sport is international. So there are more opportunities beyond the walls of USPSA. I would love for them to be recognized or the sport in general to be recognized by the IOC IPC, but I want to make sure that we're careful with how we go about that. Um, we don't want to be making decisions that take us away from our from the course of development that we want for our own organization. Does that make sense? There isn't a ton of chatter right now. I'm sick of hearing me talk, but want to get the sport more out there and therefore get more funding and grow and expand. Yeah. Yeah, no, we'd get more eyeballs on it, and I think that's fantastic. It's it, I think we are taking steps in that direction, right? By adding classifications at our highest level of play and that sort of thing. What I wouldn't want to do is say, hey, everybody has to follow FIFA classifications now, whether you are just getting in a chair for the first time or you've been playing for years, right? If that's what it took to get recognized by the IPC, would it be worth doing? No. So I think we can have that aspiration. We can work towards that as long as we're not only working towards that. We have to keep our best interests in mind. Yes, yeah, Connor, I agree with you. David says, yeah, not ruin the home game in favor of developing the game in a way that caters to the IOC IPC, all for participation in the game domestically for sure, but also super in favor of developing in a way where some of us will be able to compete in for our community. Yeah. Yeah, for our country in the Paralympics. I think that would be fantastic. I mean, I'm not shying away from that. And I think it is a benefit of starting to be more structured with classifications and that sort of thing. Um, but I do think it's important to not just again go full bore towards that and leave the rest, in your wake.
And to go along with that, George, if you don't mind me jumping in here,
Yep, go
uh,
ahead.
it's I feel like this conversation is kind of uh, the epitome or the theme of what this team has been challenged with is how can we impact as many type of athletes that we can, whether it's those really elite athletes that have the dream of the Paralympics. I know that we all have those dreams of being a Paralympian, but those elite athletes that can travel all the way down to these brand new kids or brand new players that are just getting involved. And that's kind of the theme of this entire system. There are things that that have a high impact on those elite athletes, and there are things that have a high impact on those newer athletes. None of the decisions that we made were for a primary or a sole purpose of one thing, and that's kind of what the Paralympics is. Like, yes, classification will help with that conversation, but it also helps with other things, and that's kind of like the entire challenge of this entire thing. We have such a wide range of types of athletes in our league, and we're trying to worry about or consider those brand new athletes that kick a ball for the first time and their faces just light up. That's the best feeling in the world to see that. But there's also those elite athletes that deserve that recognition as well, that have put years and years into this game and want to go that much level. So
I do want to jump in on something that happened at one of the other town halls. I can't remember if it was yesterday or the day before. We were talking about the just about classifications in general for Paralympics, and they were saying that some sports aren't classified, like in I think it was sled hockey. Um, I didn't address it at the time, but I'm pretty sure everybody in sled hockey has to push themselves, right? Where if you go to see a sled hockey tournament in your local neighborhood, you're going to see some that have pushers, right? There's going to be some people pushing, an able-bodied skating, pushing a sled so that the person that's in the sled can be using the sticks to hit the puck. But essentially, what they did at that Paralympic level then is say, no, there's not classifications for this sport, maybe, but you have to push yourself. If you don't push yourself, then you're out. And I don't want to do that, something like that with our sport. Kind of like what Nathan is saying is like we can take our most elite athletes and push them. And I want to be able to do that. I think it's best for everybody, but we want to make sure that we're doing that in a way that doesn't take away anything from those foundational athletes. I think another thing, I'm not sure how there's a lot of connections that I make in my brain that I don't necessarily say. And we've been talking for 2 hours. So, how many more connections are out there? But I'm not sure how explicitly I tied the thought of some of our non-conference teams as well, maybe the ones that aren't eligible for that conference cup, and maybe part of the reason they're non-conference is because they can't travel all the way to wherever that conference cup is going to be held. Now, they might not be able to go to it every year, but if that regional was within, a closer vicinity and they could participate in some of that, how much is that going to build the sport versus having them to make sure that they never have access by having it in a different location entirely? Um, How does the new structure provide? Let's see. Hold on, I'm a little lost. I'm going backwards. Enoch, for nationals and ascent, 12 teams go. After pool play, three brackets will be created. If this is correct, is there a champion in each bracket? Yes. Yep. So yeah, there's three different brackets. There that at the higher level, the middle level, the lower level. Depending on how many teams there might. I mean, if there's not enough ascent teams, maybe if there's only 10 or something, then it might just be a 5 and a 5 or whatever, and then it would just be two that would go, and you'd have two wild cards. It would kind of depend on how many teams were there. What is the new structure providing a ladder experience for those new teams and athletes? So again, having the proximity by keeping it in the region, I think will be a benefit. Is it a benefit every year? No, not necessarily. I think having the ability to jump right in from recreational to ascent to be eligible for that regional competition in year one would help. I think having the ability to form clubs would also help, having that mentorship opportunity. Um, how else? So are we talking about like brand new teams, never, totally new athletes? Or are we talking about developing athletes? Or there's a lot of different, you know. ways to go depending on the level of athlete, but we can talk more about that later. There's this was sort of answered, but not entirely, I think. But how many events can we expect per season? For as far as like opens and things, that's going to be totally up to teams. Just like now, the teams that host tournaments host tournaments. We aren't going to get in their way of hosting tournaments, other than making sure they're not taking our limited referee pool for the same weekends as like a classic or whatever. But yes, USPSA is going to stay hands off at this point for the local tournaments. Um, we're here to help, host, I mean, ideas of how to host a tournament. That's something that we've been trying to work on, getting a document together for hosts to say, hey, this is what you need to be thinking about. Um, did that answer it, David? If not, type back in. Um, And sled hockey is in the Paralympics, but also has a nationals that does not require regionals or qualification to attend nationals. They also maintain appropriate divisions. Yeah, Marie, do you know how many? So I'm not intimately familiar with sled hockey. I will be honest with that. I've been to some matches, but I have no idea about the size and that sort of thing. So I'd love to have some conversations with you about that afterwards. Events from USPSA would be one event per region plus nationals, correct? Yes. Yep. So right now, USPSA does one event. Now they would essentially be doing four. The nationals would be significantly smaller, and it's hard because it's called the same thing, right? Or it's that nationals, but it's not what we expect nationals to be. What we expect nationals to be will be the regional. Okay, the questions are dying down here. I think what I'm going to do is